Namaskar, good evening. It's 9 p.m. and you're watching the news on Sansad TV with Rajiv Kumar Singh. In the next half an hour, we will bring the top news from the national and international arena, the Supreme Court's decisions in the Gyanvapi and NEET matters. We will also know about PM Modi's message to the growing startup community. On the international front, we will know about the latest developments from Sri Lanka and the war front in Ukraine, as well as news related to world of business and sports. First up, the headlines. Nation accelerating development with a new youthful energy, says Prime Minister Modi at the launch of Madhya Pradesh Startup Conclave. At Congress 3-day strategy session, President Sonia Gandhi emphasizes need for major reforms in the party, calls for collective efforts by party leaders and workers. NEET-PG examination to be held on schedule on 21st of May. Supreme Court refuses to postpone examination, says delay will seriously impact patient care. Exports up 30.7% in April, increase to $40.19 billion, following excellent performance in sectors like petroleum, electronic goods and chemicals. Sri Lankan Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe says he is hopeful of close relations with India, meets the Indian High Commissioner in Colombo. Let us now take a quick look at some more important news stories of the day. Southwest monsoon expected to make early onset over Kerala by May 27th instead of June 1st. No respite from scorching heat in Rajasthan, Delhi, Bombay, hottest at 48 degrees Celsius. IMD issues red alert in 6 districts, orange alert in Delhi. Prime Minister Modi invites citizens to share inputs for Mann Ki Baat program on 29th of May. Punjab Police uncovers Babbar Khalsa International and ISI conspiracy behind rocket-propelled grenade attack. 5 suspects arrested. Election Commission announces schedule for biennial elections to Rajya Sabha from Punjab. SBI reports 40% jump in net profit to rupees 9,113 crore in Q4. Shares jump 3%. Indian embassy in Ukraine to resume its operation from the Ukrainian capital Kiev from 17th of May. UAE President and ruler of Abu Dhabi, Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan, passes away. Country announces 40-day mourning. Pakistan's foreign exchange reserves fall to its lowest level since December 2019. Central bank's reserves also at a 23-month low. In a breakthrough experiment, scientists grow plants in moon soil collected during NASA's Apollo missions decades ago. Now, news in detail. Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Friday launched the Madhya Pradesh Startup Policy and Portal through video conferencing. Speaking on the occasion, he said, not only a proactive startup policy, the country now has a dedicated startup leadership and is accelerating development with a new youthful energy. He said, under the startup policy of Madhya Pradesh, financial assistance has been given to startups and incubators.
भारत में स्टार्टअप की दुनिया ही बदल चुकी है। आज हमारे देश में करीब 70,000 रिकॉग्नाइज्ड स्टार्टअप्स हैं। आज भारत में दुनिया का तीसरा सबसे बड़ा स्टार्टअप इकोसिस्टम है। हम दुनिया के सबसे बड़े यूनिकॉर्न हब्स में भी एक ताकत के रूप में उभर रहे हैं।
The Supreme Court has declined to postpone NEET-PG 2022 examination. The court said delay will lead to unavailability of doctors and will seriously impact patient care. It further said that postponing the examination will create chaos and uncertainty. Also, it will affect a large section of students who registered for the exam. The court said the government is trying to conduct the examination on time after the pandemic. The three-day Nav Sankalp Shivir of the Congress began in Udaipur, describing Chintar Shivir as an opportunity to discuss the challenges facing the country. Congress President Sonia Gandhi spoke about the need for major reforms in the party. She called on leaders to infuse new life into the party through collective efforts.
असाधारण परिस्थितियों का मुकाबला असाधारण तरीके से ही किया जा सकता है, इस बात के प्रति मैं पूरी सचेत हूँ। हर संगठन को न केवल जीवित रहने के लिए बल्कि बढ़ने के लिए भी समय समय पर अपने अंदर परिवर्तन लाने होते हैं। हमें सुधारों की सख्त जरूरत है।
President Ramnath Kovind will be on a week-long visit to Jamaica and St. Vincent and the Grenadines from May 15th. This is the first visit of an Indian head of state to these two Caribbean countries. The president's visit marks the continuation of India's high-level engagement with countries in the Caribbean region. The president will be in Jamaica from May 15th to 18th, during which he will hold delegation-level talks with his counterpart, Governor-General of Jamaica, Sir Patrick Allen. The president will also address a joint sitting of both houses of Jamaica's parliament. In the second leg, Kovind will visit St. Vincent and Grenadines from May 18th to 21st.
The Honorable President Shri Ramnath Kovind will pay a state visit to Jamaica and St. Vincent and Grenadines from 15th to 21st of May 2022. This would be the first visit by the head of state of India to these two countries and reflective of our commitment to small island developing states and to the CARICOM, which is the Caribbean community, of which both these countries are members.
Vice President M. Venkaiah Naidu presented the Ghantasala Memorial Award to leading playback singer Mano in Hyderabad. The Vice President said Mano has proven his versatility not only as a singer but also as an actor, TV show host, judge, music director and dubbing artist. Uttar Pradesh Assembly Speaker Satish Mahana called on Lok Sabha Speaker Om Birla in Delhi on Friday. Om Birla congratulated and wished him all the best for his new assignment. The two leaders discussed various topics, including the proposed orientation program of new elected MLAs in the Uttar Pradesh Legislative Assembly this month. The ED has seized rupees 88.3 lakh in cash from a person in Madhya Pradesh and Goa as part of a money laundering probe. The searches were conducted against Sanjay Vijay Shinde, who had beneficial interests in the offshore entity located in the British Virgin Islands and in whose Singapore bank account more than rupees 31 crore were deposited by various offshore entities. The Enforcement Directorate also searched the premises of a Kolkata-based housing company and its two directors as part of the probe into a money laundering case. The case pertains to defrauding several home buyers. The raids were conducted at the premises of Abhijat Constructions Company Private Limited and its directors Abhijit Sen and Sujata Sen, the agency said in a statement. The National Investigation investigating agency arrested 2 close associates of gangster Chhota Shakeel on charges of handling financial transactions of a crime syndicate controlled by fugitive underworld don Dawood Ibrahim. The arrested men include Arif Abu Bakr Sheikh and Shabir Abu Bakr Sheikh. India's exports grew 30.7% to $40.19 billion in April, driven by good performance in sectors like petroleum products, electronic goods and chemicals. The Ministry of Commerce said the country's trade deficit increased to more than $20 billion in the month under review. Imports increased by 30.97% to $60.3 billion. Niti Aayog launched National Data and Analytics Platform (NDP) for open public access. The objective of the platform is to make data available on an accessible, interoperable, interactive and user-friendly platform. It hosts basic data sets from various government agencies and also provides tools for analysis and visualization. The Supreme Court on Friday refused to grant an interim order of status quo to the video survey of the Gyanvyapi Shringar Gauri complex near the famed Kashi Vishwanath temple in Varanasi. The top court, however, agreed to consider listing the plea of a Muslim party against the survey of the Gyanvyapi Masjid premises. Early, a Varanasi court had dismissed a petition seeking removal of the commissioner appointed for the videography survey of the Gyanvyapi Shringar Gauri complex on charges of favoritism. It directed that the videography report be presented by May 17th. Survey videography work of Gyanvyapi Shringar Gauri complex is likely to start from Saturday. Jammu and Kashmir Lieutenant Governor Manoj Sinha met relative of Rahul Bhatt, a government employee belonging to the Kashmiri Pandit community. Bhatt, who got the job under the special employment package for migrants in Jammu and Kashmir in 2010-11, was shot dead by terrorists in Chadura town of Badgam district on Thursday. His last rites were performed on Friday. Manoj Sinha said the terrorists and the supporters will pay a heavy price for the murder. May 13th has a special significance in the democratic history of India. The first Parliament session of independent India convened on this day in 1952. The upper house, the Rajya Sabha, was constituted for the first time on April 3rd, 1952, and its first session was held on May 13th, 1952. Similarly, the first Lok Sabha was constituted on April 17th, 1952, and the first session was convened on May 13th, 1952. Speaking on the occasion, Rajya Sabha Chairman M. Venkaiah Naidu has appealed to the members of the House to live up to the expectations of the founding members and engage in constructive debate. He also greeted the members and employees of Rajya Sabha on this occasion. Time for a short break here. On the other side, Dried Up Lake in Las Vegas reveals some long-forgotten secrets of mafia.
The use of social media has led to a paradigm shift in the craft of diplomacy. You opened the first Twitter account of MEA way back in July 2010.
If you engage, you build credibility.
Social media is impacting the way how a war is conducted, it's shaping public opinion. When it comes to diplomacy, what we can learn that sometimes some level of discretion is needed.
When in doubt, don't post.
Let's now get you all the latest development from the Russia-Ukraine war, which is showing no signs of abating. The first war crimes trial against a Russian soldier since the start of the war in Ukraine began in Kiev. A 21-year-old captured member of the tank unit is accused of shooting a civilian during the first week of the war. Journalists were packed into a small courtroom in the Ukrainian capital where the suspect appeared in a small glass cage. Sergeant Vadim Shishirmarin is accused of shooting a 62-year-old man in the head. He faces life imprisonment under the Ukrainian Criminal Code. Russia has warned that it will have to take unspecified military technical steps in response to Finland's decision to join NATO. The Russian foreign ministry said that Finland's accession to NATO will inflict serious damage to Russian-Finnish relations, as well as stability and security in Northern Europe. The ministry charged that Finland's move also violated past agreements with Russia. The UN's top human rights body has passed a resolution calling on its investigators to specifically look into possible rights abuses and violations in northern Ukraine shortly after Russia's invasion. The Human Rights Council concluded a special session on Thursday within a 33-2 vote and 12 abstentions. It called on Russia to grant international human rights groups safe access to people transferred from Ukraine to Russia or areas controlled by Russian forces or affiliates. Only China and Eritrea voted against the measure. Russian President Vladimir Putin says Western sanctions against Russia are provoking a global economic crisis. Speaking at a Thursday meeting on economic issues, Putin said Western nations were driven by oversized political ambitions and Russophobia to introduce sanctions that hurt their own economies and well-being of their citizens. Putin charged that the sanctions are provoking a global crisis and will lead to grave consequences for the EU and also some of the poorest countries of the world that are already facing the risks of hunger. Between 8 and 12 Russian missiles hit the oil refinery and other infrastructure in the Ukrainian industrial hub of Kremenchuk Thursday. Ukrainian officials said that the Kremenchuk refinery, Ukraine's only remaining fully functional facility of its kind at the time, was no longer operational following a Russian attack. The UN Refugee Agency is reporting that more than 6 million people have now fled Ukraine in the wake of Russia's invasion. Geneva-based UNHCR also said that the number of the refugees who have returned back to Ukraine, either partially or fully, has reached more than 1.6 million. It says that number reflects cross-border movements and doesn't necessarily indicate sustainable returns. The agency says it's too early to draw conclusions about definitive trends on returns. Talks are underway between Kiev and Moscow on the possible evacuation of 38 severely wounded Ukrainian troops from the Azovstal steelworks in Mariupol. Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister said Thursday afternoon. The steel mill is the only remaining stronghold of Ukrainian resistance in the ruined port city and is now surrounded by Russian forces. Some other global updates in this quick wrap. Sri Lanka's new Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe says he looks forward to closer ties with India during his term. He also thanked India for its economic assistance to the country as it tackles the worst economic crisis since independence.
Five-time former Sri Lankan Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe was reappointed on Thursday in an effort to bring stability to the island nation engulfed in a political and economic crisis. Wickremesinghe took his oath in a ceremony at the President's residence. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa's brother Mahinda Rajapaksa resigned as Prime Minister on Monday, following violent attacks by supporters on peaceful anti-government protesters. His resignation automatically dissolved the cabinet, leaving an administrative vacuum. The president's selection of Wickremesinghe is an attempt to end violence triggered by the crisis and restore international credibility as the government negotiates a bailout package with the International Monetary Fund. On Wednesday, authorities deployed armored vehicles and troops in the streets of the capital after attacks on protesters triggered a wave of violence across the country. 9 people died and more than 200 were injured. Security forces have been ordered to shoot people deemed to be participating in the violence as sporadic acts of arson and vandalism continue despite a strict nationwide curfew that began Monday evening. Wickremesinghe has been in parliament for 45 years. His political party split in 2020 amid a leadership crisis, and most senior members left to form a new party, which is currently the country's main opposition. Bureau Report, Sansad TV.
Elon Musk's $44 billion purchase of Twitter is temporarily on hold. The announcement was another twist in the Twitter deal. Musk reportedly halted the deal pending data on the proportion of fake accounts on Twitter. The news sent the shares in the social media platform plunging. It wasn't clear whether the fake account issue could scuttle the Twitter deal. The stock in both Twitter and Tesla swung sharply on opposite directions. Twitter's stock tumbled 18% and Tesla, which Musk had proposed using to help fund the Twitter deal, jumped 5%. Twitter said the company is pausing most hiring and expect for business-critical roles. In addition, it said in a statement, we are pulling back on non-labor costs to ensure we are being responsible and efficient. And in news from across the world, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un visited his COVID crisis headquarters on Thursday. A video showed Kim wearing a white mask in the first shot and then a green face mask on subsequent sequences. The North Korean media said a fever whose cause couldn't be identified explosively spread nationwide from late April and 6 people died, one testing positive for the Omicron variant of COVID-19. North Korea was the first country in the world to close its borders against COVID in January 2020. Hundreds of protesters marched towards the Election Commission in Manila on Friday, demanding action against what they called election irregularities and other anomalies in the recent presidential elections. The protesters chanted "Never again" to martial law while holding signs reading "Reject election irregularities, defend democracy" and offered prayers for the country. Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. garnered more than 31 million votes in an unofficial count. His vice presidential running mate, Sara Duterte, also won an apparent landslide, and they will take office on 30th of June. Australia has alleged that a Chinese warship with spying capabilities has been hugging the nation's western coastline in what amounted to an aggressive act. Minister Peter Dutton said the ship was sighted on Friday morning, heading north about 250 nautical miles from Broome in Western Australia and had been tracked along the coastline for the past week. He said it was unprecedented for a Chinese warship to venture so far south and that authorities were monitoring the ship closely with planes and surveillance techniques. Thousands of activists marched in Buenos Aires demanding more work and better income. They also called for the government to renegotiate the national debt with the International Monetary Fund. Argentina is coping with acute poverty and accelerated inflation that this year increased by 23.1%. Authorities reported the highest monthly inflation in 20 years in March being 6.7%. Demonstrators joining the so-called Federal March have toured for 3 days across Argentina to make their demands heard across the country. Hundreds of teachers from Peru National Teachers Union marched on Thursday, demanding better working conditions and to President Pedro Castillo to resign. Demands across the protesters underlined that Castillo was a teacher before taking office and so he should understand their requirements better. Handwritten signs also remarked that Castillo should abide by their presidential campaign promises. Las Vegas is reviving stories about organized crime after sets of human remains emerged from the depths of a dried-up Colorado River reservoir. Speculation is rife that the remains belonged to victims of mafia killings whose bodies were dumped into the lake.
Drought-stricken Lake Mead in America seems to be giving up some of its long-held macabre secrets. Unidentified human remains revealed by the drying lake are reviving memories of long-departed Las Vegas organized crime figures. The suspicion is that these remains belong to victims of mafia mob hits. The reservoir on Colorado River is about a 30-minute drive from the mob-founded Las Vegas strips. Former mob lawyers, however, say mafia in those days did their killings away from Las Vegas because they did not want to bring attention to Las Vegas. Needless to say, many of these murders were never solved. But in the meantime, climate change may be doing its bit to throw light on the matter. Since 1983, Lake Mead has dropped more than 170 feet. The lake that services 40 million people in 7 states is down to about 30% of its capacity. Among its beneficiaries are casinos, suburbs, and millions of tourists per year. In recent times, boaters spotted the decomposed body of a man in a rusted barrel stuck in the mud of newly exposed shoreline. The victim was murdered. The body dates back to mid-1970s, 1980s, according to the shoes on it. Some days later, 2 sisters on a boating trip found human bones and teeth on a newly surfaced sandbar. Although it may not all be the work of mobs and the mafia, there are other stories as well of people murdered over family disputes, personal enmity, or just plain suicides. Bureau Report, Sansad TV.
Now all the action from the world of sports. In badminton, India taking on Denmark in the Thomas Cup semi-finals being played in Bangkok. India secured their first ever medal at the Thomas Cup, beating Malaysia 3-2 in the semi-finals. Lakh lost to Victor Exelsen in match number 1. Satwik and Chirag made it 1-1 for India, winning in the first doubles. Indian boxers Shiksa in 54 kg, Jasmine in 60 kg and Anamika in 50 kg categories showed their skills and maturity to advance to the pre-quarterfinals at the 12th edition of the IBA Women's World Boxing Championship in Istanbul. Shiksha bet Argentina's Herrera Milagros Rosario, displaying brilliant temperament and skill. Jasmine faced a tough challenge from Thailand's 2-time Youth Asian champion Pontim Buapa. The Indian boxer came back strongly in the last 2 rounds to win by a 4-1 split. Tottenham bet 10-man Arsenal 3-0 on Thursday to keep alive the hopes of finishing in the Premier League's top 4. Antonio Conte's side would have been eliminated from the race to qualify for the next season's Champions League if they had lost to the bitter North London rivals. But Harry Kane tormented Arsenal once again with 2 goals, the first being a controversial penalty. Crucially, Arsenal's Rob Holding was sent off for 2 bookings in 7 minutes. In tennis, Wimbledon is under threat from sanctions after banning Russian and Belarusian players from the championships this year. The decision has been criticized by the likes of Novak Djokovic and Alexander Zverev, and the ATP could now strip all ranking points from the prestigious Grand Slam tournament in a huge statement. Before we close, the headlines once again. Nation accelerating development with a new youthful energy, says Prime Minister Modi at the launch of Madhya Pradesh Startup Conclave. At Congress' 3-day strategy session, President Sonia Gandhi emphasizes need for major reforms in the party, calls for collective efforts by party leaders and workers. NEET-PG examination to be held on schedule on 21st of May. Supreme Court refuses to postpone examination, says delay will seriously impact patient care. Exports up 30.7% in April, increase to $40.19 billion following excellent performance in sectors like petroleum, electronic goods and chemicals. Sri Lankan Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe says he is hopeful of close relations with India, meets the Indian High Commissioner in Colombo. That is all we have in this bulletin tonight. This bulletin can also be watched on our social media platforms. All you need to follow Sansad TV on social media. To keep yourself updated, keep watching Sansad TV. Take very good care of yourselves. Good night. Namaskar.